Winter Roses, Autumn by Fairytalelovr, Chapter 16. Before I start, I'm sorry if there's background noise. Catelyn had prepared for nasty looks and glares, and the lords and ladies of Westeros had not disappointed, looking at her as if she'd committed a capital sin, or as if grayscale had broken out on her face. She knew Ned hadn't disclosed the reason he had sent her away, but even if he wasn't the Honourable Lord Stark, and therefore people judged he had a good cause, she knew they would still blame her for the failure of their marriage. She hadn't attended a feast since the king's arrival in Winterfell, and that had been 3 years ago, so she was enjoying it thoroughly, even if her dress was simple, though Robb had arranged to send her a better one than the other Septors had, and her only piece of jewellery was the necklace Peter had given her. And Catelyn had to give it to the Tyrells. They did know how to throw a banquet. Marjorie and Robb made the image of the perfect young couple in love, sitting at the high table, whispering sweet nothings to each other amidst laughter. The cooler weather allowed the bride to continue to wear her matrimonial cloak, and she looked beautiful with the white fur covering her. "I cannot begin to say how happy I am that you were invited, Cat." "Peter!" She smiled. "Yes, Robb came and invited me himself a few days ago." "How wonderful!" Littlefinger smiled. "If I had known, I would have gotten you a proper dress." "Robb had this one sent over. I think Septrinella wouldn't have allowed anything else. She was ill-humoured enough that the High Septon allowed this." "If the good Septa had her way, we would all be barefoot, wearing rough-spun robes and giving our money to the poor." "Don't give her any ideas," Catelyn said acidly. The feasting was giving way to the dancing, and the entertainers were clearing space for the minstrels. They looked over to the high table where Daenerys was helping Marjorie remove her cloak, and then the bride took her husband's hand and he led them to the dance floor. Daenerys dragged Jon away as soon as the first dance was over, and it didn't take much longer for Edric to come asking for Sansa's company. Ella chuckled when she saw Ned shrinking a bit on his chair, once Benjen also led Isla to the dance floor. "You can relax. You are not dancing today," she said.
"Oh, thank the gods,"
he exhaled in relief. "Thank our child. I'm too uncomfortable to give it a go."
"Papa is already very proud of you,"
he said with a pat to Ella's very large bump and then kissing the back of her hand. "You're helpless," she chuckled. "And to think that we met on a dance floor."
"I had no other way of getting near you," Ned shrugged.
"What would you have done if Brandon hadn't come to ask me?" she asked quietly.
"He wouldn't have refused, because that was the kind of meddling Brandon loved to get into. I didn't even outright ask him. He just saw me looking longingly at the most beautiful maiden in the ballroom and decided to play matchmaker. But I would have sent Benjen, or I'm sure Lyanna would have volunteered."
"And if I had said no?" Ella said with a smile.
"Then my heart would have been irredeemably broken," he answered, returning the smile.
A few moments later, Ned was dragged away by enthusiastic northern lords and their lady wives kept Ella company. After a few songs, Jon managed to extricate himself from Dany's twirls and took to the side of the dance floor. Only because she, God knows how, convinced Adam to take his place, leaving him with Rhalos and Leeds as an escort. "I must confess," a young woman said as she came nearer. Jon recognized by her features and accent that she was a salty Dornish, but he had no idea whom she might be. "That all I heard about you is still making me think of you a Northman without any attractives, Lord Starling. But I find the truth to be so much more accommodating," she finished with a wicked smile.
"I'm sorry, my lady, but you have me at a disadvantage," Jon said, uncomfortable with the predatory look she had.
"Lady!" she scoffed. "Please, I am no such little useless thing," she smiled. "I am a princess. The princess. Ariane Martell."
"Of course, forgive me, Princess Ariane, but you are simply nothing like we are usually find in court. Well met, your grace."
"Prim and proper, like a prudish northerner," she said, and then tried to ghost her fingers over John's arms. With those eyes of yours, and these curls, it would be a shame to not add some spice to your dull life.
He caught her wrists. My life is far from dull, princess. You needn't worry.
Her smile didn't falter as she took her hand back. I hear the little dragon lady was raised in the cold, prudish north. Wouldn't you like to taste some spice, John Starling? She tried, stepping closer again. My blood runs hot enough to warm you up nicely. I can assure you.
My lady wife is a dragon, princess, John said in a low voice. I doubt even the sun burns that hot. If you would excuse me, your grace.
He turned to leave, but was faced with a furious Daenerys, her face red with indignation. What is happening here? She demanded.
Princess Ariane was only introducing herself, John said, though the stormy look on Dany's amethyst eyes was making him nervous.
Well met, Lady Starling, Ariane said, her smile still in place.
Enough, Ari,
Adam said quietly.
You don't want to cause a scene.
But I didn't do anything, she said innocently, though her smile only grew.
Tell that to someone who hasn't grown up with your uncle and carried you around when you were too young to walk. Adam spat through his teeth. Go now. This is not the place, much less the time, to pick a fight.
I look forward to our next conversation, Lord Starling, Ariane said. Lady Starling, it was a pleasure. She walked away, her smoke still in place. Dany! John held her back. We are in the middle of my brother's wedding feast. In the Red Keep. You can't get into a fight with the Princess of Dawn. She better keep her distance, Dany said lowly, backing down as she noticed the stares they were getting, and the alarm in John's voice broke through the fog of righteous indignation and fury in her mind.
I don't care what she says or does, John said back. You know I would never.
I know that, Dany scoffed. Doesn't mean she is allowed to try.
John smiled. You know, you look even lovelier when you're angry and furious, he whispered lowly. Adam rolled his eyes and took one step further away, Raylos and Leeds following his example. Trying to make me angry might not be good for our marriage, Dany whispered back, though she was now smiling. I wouldn't, John chuckled. Though, I have to confess, the only fact that we have come back for the northern ceremony is keeping me from throwing you over my shoulder and dragging you to our chambers, where I would proceed to rip that dress off you and make you flush red for another reason altogether. Hold that thought until the evening, my lord husband. Then I will show you why you have no need of a slutty Dornish princess. You are the only princess I want, he whispered into her ear, so that there would be no chance for anyone to overhear. Good, because I don't like sharing. John chuckled as she dragged him back to the dance floor. Time passed comfortably, everyone eating and drinking and dancing until the sun set and darkness took over. Half the southern lords decided to keep enjoying the feast, but the wedding party followed to the Godswood for the northern ceremony. Once they were making their way back to the banquet, John matched steps with his brother. After a whole day drinking, these lords and ladies are beginning to look too drunk, he said, and Theon proved their point by starting to sing off tune behind them. Unless you want a drunk Greyjoy pouring on Marjorie, retire now before they call a bedding ceremony. It's tradition, Marjorie said, though there was trepidation in her voice. My father didn't allow for it in either of his two weddings, Robb said. I knew that at John. Besides, if we go now, people won't even notice. But it's up to you, Marjorie. Theon yelled a particularly bawdy joke, and they all twisted their faces in disgust. Let's go, the bride agreed. We don't need to observe this tradition. We'll cover for you, Dany said. Just come with me, Jory said, leading the way with a torch. Since you are speaking of jealousy, Dany said quietly to her husband as they resumed their way to the feast, I remember your flushed indignation when Theon tried to call for the bedding at our wedding. We might not have married an accept, Dany, but I am yours, and you are mine. someone tries to touch you, they'll lose their fingers. At minimum.
Good, she smiled. As long as you know that the reciprocal is true.
Good, he smiled back.
Ned still thought that the arrangement of a wedding was something that was too cold to lead to love. A bartering and negotiation of terms and conditions. He was still hesitant to trust anyone from the Citadel, but having decided Maester Byron was worthy of trust, and Silver's acceptance of his presence only reinforcing it. He had tried not to laugh when the direwolf had barked at Lord Baelish for the first time they met at the small council. After Tywin Lannister's attempt at passing his law, and how the Master of Coin had aided him, Ned couldn't trust the man. Edric had left Starfall's new maester behind, saying that he was still testing the man's loyalty after Corlys's betrayal. But Oberyn had sent an advisor from Sunspear to aid him, and even had one or two things to say about the contract. Not to mention Adam, who looked over it as well. But finally, all terms and conditions agreed upon, and the dowry stipulated, the scribe was finishing writing everything down when Sansa came into the room. Father, you sent for me?
I did, love, Ned said. Excuse us for one moment, my lords.
He stood from his desk and led Sansa across the corridor to Ella's empty sala.
My sweet girl, we are about to sign the papers. So, if you have any doubts whatsoever, speak now. I will ask Edric to wait until you are sure. You don't have to worry.
Sansa frowned. Father, why? I thought it was very unusual to ask the bride for her opinion, especially as many times as you have. Ned sighed, remembering the awful night between Lyanna and their father, the night before Lord Rickard had left to meet with Robert and sign their betrothal.
One day I shall explain my reasons, but not now. For now, what you need to know is that you are my beloved daughter, and I need to know you will be happy.
I will, Father, Sansa said with a smile. I will be very happy. I know it.
Good. Ned hugged and kissed her forehead. I will go sign the papers then.
Ella is resting, so I don't wish to disturb her, but Lady Ilaria is here, and asked me to go on a walk so we could talk about Starfall. May I go?
Oh, of course, love,
Ned said, happy that Sansa seemed to be getting along with her aunt, even if she thought Ilaria would only become her aunt once she married Edric. He went back to his sala and barely finished putting the quill away before there was a knock on the service door, and Lord Varys let himself in. I am terribly sorry to interrupt, Lord Stark, but I wonder if I may have a word against a most urgent matter. Seeing that the scribe was still sanding the signatures, and it would take him more than a moment to gather his things to leave the room, Ned led them once more to Bella's sala.
What is it?
My lord, you know as well as I that, regardless of what you say, there is no betrothal, back when it was first offered. Robert still wants to call Lady Sansa daughter one day.
I told him I wouldn't allow Sansa to marry Joffrey after what he did in Winterfell.
I know, my lord, but the king rarely listens to what displeases him. He thought it was a matter of time, that Joffrey would grow older and smarter, and therefore the marriage would take place. Ned cursed under his breath.
So what? I'll tell him gently tomorrow if I...
Littlefinger is on his way back from the Sept of Baelor, and my little birds told me he heard quite the tale from Lady Catelyn. He sent a squire ahead to request an audience with the king, so he is clearly wanting to cause intrigue. I told you once, Lord Stark, the Lannisters' only way to get rid of you without detonating a war would have Robert sending you packing.
And Lord Baelish is on the Lannisters' side. Is that it?
Littlefinger is on Littlefinger's side, Lord Stark. He will do what is best for him. And after you've cut half his income and his corruption network in the city, the best for him is not your continued presence.
Ned cursed loudly. I'll go to Robert then, before Baelish can poison him. Can you delay him?
I can try, but as long as you get through the king's door first, Littlefinger will have to wait for his audience. The king would never let anyone disturb you.
Good. See it done, Lord Varys,
Ned said and went to get his cloak, making a quick excuse to Edric, saying he would return shortly, so that they could toast the signed contract. His heart was pumping quickly as he rushed through the Red Keep to make Oswald fast.
No one comes in until I give the order, he told Jory and the Kingsguard at the doors. Nod! Robert greeted once he was inside. Did you hear? Oh, I almost wrung that boy's neck with my bare hands.
Ned cursed mentally. Robert was already furious with something. His whole face flushed dark red.
What is it?
He asked, afraid of the reaction he would get.
That boy! That fucking blasted boy! Is rotten in the inside, I tell you!
Robert exclaimed, and Ned was worried about the pulsing vein on the side of his head.
Joffrey? Yes, Joffrey. Cursed was the day Cersei pushed him out of her. Robert, what happened?
The king drank his whole cup and slammed it on the table.
Sir Barristan came to tell me. Said he wanted to warn me before he went to you. He didn't tell you.
We must have missed each other on the way, Ned said.
What did Joffrey do? Littlefinger, from all the height of his whoring wisdom, thought it would be sensible to send the boy a whore. Apparently they talked at the wedding. The girl was found thrown in the middle of the sitting room, badly beaten and bleeding, as the little princeling slept peacefully in his bed. Sir Barristan said it looked like 5 men had attacked the girl. 5! They were still bringing her to the Grand Maester.
Ned rubbed his forehead, cursing quietly.
You know we won't be able to cover this up, don't you, Robert? Even if you throw a fortune at this girl and offer her a good husband with a position, people will talk. I know. Robert was breathing hard now. I will look for a husband and a position, of course, because she needs compensation too. But how do I punish Joffrey? You can't send him to Casterly Rock, Robert. He will only come back worse. Worse? That boy's my fucking heir! My eldest son, the next king. How can it get any worse?
Ned sighed, watching as the king furiously vented about Joffrey's misdeeds. He knew there was an easy way to quench Robert's fears about the Crown Prince's mad designs once he became king, but he still didn't dare voice it. Perhaps it would be the wrong moment. Better to wait until Robert was at least calmer to announce Sansa's betrothal, and if Joffrey acted out again, then propose a drastic measure. Jon and Robb watched with amusement as the energetic maester barked orders at the sailors as they brought his things aboard.
Are you sure you wouldn't rather wait to come to the north with us? Jon asked again. You would be more comfortable, and my ship can bring you as far as the wall, Archmaester.
No. I have already spent enough time here. Wasted enough time. Though researching the Red Keep's library can never be considered a waste of time. But no, I would much rather prefer to get going. And there is much to do, much to learn, and I'm certain Aemon and I have then much to discuss. Time is precious, my lords. Learn that.
It is an important lesson, Jon said. Please, Archmaester, do give our regards to Maester Aemon.
Archmaester, the captain says we will depart as soon as you are aboard, Alaris said. Now then, let's go. Lord Robb, Lord Starling, it was a pleasure. Until next time. And he left briskly towards the boat, following his assistant.
That is the kind of man who would time his conversations with sand glasses to make sure they didn't last longer than necessary, Robb said. Jon laughed. He certainly is.
He then turned to go back to where the guards were waiting with their horses.
By the way, Adam told me something this morning. Where is your shadow? Robb asked.
Going after Daenerys. Though I couldn't explain to you the change of heart. He said that he couldn't wait until we are back to the Midnight Fortress, because the screaming competition between Dany and Marjorie these past couple of nights is getting indecent.
I think you don't have to worry after all, did you, brother? Robb chuckled. We are getting to know each other. I'm happy for you, truly. Though if you want to spare yourself some headache, make it impossible for Theon to comment. Don't worry, Robb laughed as they went upon their horses. These years alone with him in Winterfell made me quite capable of handling Theon.
Littlefinger cursed mentally as he approached the king's door, seeing that Lord Stark's guard was standing next to the king's guards. One of his spies had caught him upon his arrival at the Red Keep, just now, and told him the fate of his gift to the Prince Joffrey, and he had known that he would have to act quickly, for this would be one more argument the Northerner would use for having chosen another betrothed for his eldest daughter. would need to act offended as well, for what had been done to his gesture of goodwill, though he was annoyed only due to the financial loss. He couldn't care less about the girl.
Good morning, sirs. I have an audience with the king. The king is unavailable at the moment, Lord Baelish. Not to discredit your skills, but I believe you are Lord Stark's guard. This is the king's chambers. So why don't you return to... Lord Stark is speaking with the king.
Jory didn't even flinch at the rudeness,
and gave us orders to not allow anyone in. If you would only tell the king I am here, perhaps he would be interested. If the king wished for your presence, Lord Baelish, he would have sent for you. Jory cut in, but he has not. You are the one requesting this audience. So you will wait for the king's convenience.
Littlefinger clenched his jaw and took a step back. The king's guards, Preston Greenfield and Mandan Moore, would be easily convinced to at least ask the king if he would see him. But Stark's man, that one would be impossible to bribe or convince. So, if he wanted to cause chaos, with Eddard Stark filling Robert's ears, the king wouldn't turn against him. Not that it would have been an easy feat before. So, if he wanted chaos to come from this situation, from Sansa Stark's betrothal to Edric Dane, then he needed to go elsewhere. The scorned party, so to say. If he could manipulate things to make Joffrey pretend that he loved Sansa deeply, Robert Baratheon would remember when it had been his beloved, the Lady Lyanna, who was stolen away by another blonde twat, and not even his friendship with Ned Stark would be able to fix things. So, he turned on his heel and down the hall. As he had once told Varys, chaos is a ladder. Robert was still furious, though he was no longer fuming. He and Ned had talked about a few potential punishments for Joffrey, including real training with the knights, extra hours with the Grand Maester, and even something to do with helping the small folk. Ned doubted any of these would have any effect, but it seemed to take Robert away from the edge of his fury. Suddenly there was a loud commotion at the door. Ned stood up with a hand on his pommel, but relaxed when he saw it was Joffrey. "I demand an explanation!" the prince exclaimed.
"You can make no demands, you little shit,"
Robert yelled, his face growing crimson with fury again.
"I am your father and your king. You have no right to walk into my chambers demanding anything."
Joffrey visibly faltered, but his pale face was also flushed with anger. "Father, you said Lady Sansa was to be my bride! Mine!" Robert frowned, confused with the turn of conversation had taken. Ned felt the boiling urge to strangle Littlefinger surging up, because this was obviously his doing. After he had seen Jory outside, and therefore extrapolated that he wouldn't reach Robert in time, don't create a rift between the two friends.
"The king knows I did not accept the honour, my prince," Ned said, "and in the light of recent events, I must say I made the appropriate choice."
Joffrey bristled, breathing hard with fury.
"What does this have to do with anything?"
Robert asked.
"I believe Prince Joffrey is referring to what I came to tell you, your grace, before we were distracted by other news. I have promised Lady Sansa's hand to the Lord of Starfall, Lord Edric Dane."
Robert was shocked and conflicted. On one hand, he had still expected that Ned would change his mind and allow Sansa's betrothal to Joffrey, and they would finally be one family, after Lyanna had been stolen away, and they had the chance of becoming true brothers ripped away from them. But after the news that had greeted him this morning, "Sansa is mine!" Joffrey yelled. "I will not take this insult. I'm the Crown Prince, and I don't care what a filthy northerner thinks. No other man in the Seven Kingdoms is as good as I am, and I will have Lady Sansa. You can have her back after she has spit out an heir or two. I don't care, but I will have her." The room was so drowned in silence that the sound of Robert's hand slapping Joffrey's face echoed off the walls.
"I should have done this years ago,"
Robert said in a furious, low voice.
"Perhaps this is what you lacked. Sense slapped into you. But your mollycoddling is over. You will learn to be a man, to act like a normal person, or I will have you beaten in public. Now get right out of my sight, or I will start your education right now."
Joffrey was so shocked he could only stare at his father. his hand on his reddening cheek, his lips trembling. Then he suddenly turned on his heels and left the room. Ned watched them leave with uneasiness. You should never poke a sleeping lion, and Robert had just burst into a lion's den, shaking everything and rudely jostling the sleeping feline into alertness.
"You made an alliance with the Danes?" Robert asked, turning to his friend. "I did. That was why I was already on my way here, when Sir Barristan went to tell me about Joffrey's nightly activities." "I came to tell you." "Then why didn't you?" "Because you were furious with Joffrey, and I wanted to help you solve your issue before I told you about something happening with my family." Robert sighed. "I still wished. I wanted to call her daughter one day, but once again the chance to be family was stolen from us. I can't blame you, Ned. Especially not after last night, and what we just witnessed." "My intention was never to disrespect you, Robert," Ned said, "but after everything my family has suffered, I need to put my daughter's safety above all else." "Oh, of course," Robert said, and he was nearly melancholic now. "The king wishes Lady Sansa and Lord Dane all the happiness. When will they marry?" "Not for another 2 years, at least. We will set a date for Sansa's 16th name day." Robert nodded, already returning to his wine. Before I continue, this will be very triggering, as Joffrey has his guards attack Sansa very much in the same manner as he did when Robb won a battle and he stripped her in front of the court. Just so you are aware. Here we go. Sansa and Ellaria were happily talking, making a tour of the Red Keep as they got acquainted. Arya had stayed behind when they crossed the gardens, saying she already knew the castle and wanted to ride. "It looks scary," Ellaria said when they were before the Iron Throne. "I suppose Aegon the Conqueror wanted to inspire fear of his people and to ensure their obedience," Sansa replied. "Lady Sansa!" Joffrey exclaimed loudly, coming into the room and visibly upset. The few courtiers there turned to look. "Your Grace." Sansa curtsied, uncomfortable. It didn't matter how long she'd been in the capital. She still felt awkward around the unkind prince. "I heard the big announcement," Joffrey continued. "So you are betrothed to Lord Dane this week. Who is next? You are certainly moving down in the world." The courtiers began to whisper, and Ellaria stiffened in alert. Edric had told her they were keeping things under wraps until Lord Stark could tell the king, and they should be in the tower signing the papers now. There hadn't been time for a formal announcement yet. "What do you mean, Your Grace?" Sansa asked, anxiety rising. "I mean that your fickle father has promised you to me, and now the great Lord Stark broke his word and betrothed you to Lord Dane. He has snubbed the crown prince in favour of a nobody lord from a shithole of Dorne. One must wonder why." Sansa gulped. "I was under the impression that my lord father never accepted our betrothal." Joffrey twisted his face into something dark and ugly. "And now you call me a liar?" He started in Sansa's direction, and the guard behind her stepped closer. "You dare threaten your prince?" "Not at all, Your Grace, but I am in charge of Lady Sansa, and I think it is time we return to the tower, my lady." "Sir Boros," Joffrey called, the king's guard at his back. "Lord Stark's mad dog has offended his prince. Put him down." The order was so shocking that it took a moment for the guard to react. And that moment cost him his life. The courtiers rose in whispers. Sansa gasped. Ellaria pulled her arm. "Come on, Sansa. I'm sure Lord Stark—" "You are not going anywhere!" Joffrey exclaimed. He looked around at the group of redcoats standing nearby. "This Danish bitch, whoever she is, needs help staying in her place." Ellaria, with her sigil embroidered on her dress, and Sansa managed to get a few steps towards the doors before the redcoats reached them and dragged them back. Ellaria would have tried to reach for a dagger hidden on her waistline. She was a Dane, after all. She knew how to handle a blade. But there were just too many guards for her to overpower alone, and so the defiance would lead them nowhere. "Sir Boros," Joffrey continued in an amused tone, "Lady Sansa called me a liar. She needs to be punished." The courtiers were shocked into watching. A few had left quickly to get someone to stop the madness.
but the room kept filling up as more people came to watch. No one interfered, though. The Kingsguard pushed a trembling and scared Sansa, making her stumble and fall, and then pulled on her hair, forcing her to her knees. Joffrey smiled wickedly, taking great satisfaction in watching her blue eyes filled with tears. Sir Boros, Lady Sansa is overdressed. Unburden her. The knight smiled wickedly as he complied, tearing the back of Sansa's dress as the girl cried. Alaria fought against the two redcoats holding her, but that only earned her a slap to the face. The Kingsguard then took the pommel and went straight against Sansa's back, making her gasp as her lungs were shocked out of breath. What is happening here? Marjorie elbowed her way through the guard, gasping as she took in the scene. Send for Lord Stark, she told the guard next to her, who left quickly. Hold her down, Joffrey commanded the redcoats around. The Tyrell guard had remained with Marjorie, tried to stop it, but 3 redcoats took the best of him and seized Marjorie as he bled out on the ground. Tus, Lady Marjorie Tyrell, defending your new sister. Or should I call you Lady Marjorie Stark now? Well, no matter. I am the Crown Prince. No one can save you from me. Joffrey cackled a laugh. Sir Boros, Lady Sansa is still undisciplined. Marjorie screamed. Alaria screamed, both of them trying to get loose from the guards that held them. The crowd was enraged, but still no one interfered. Sansa cried out as the Kingsguard pushed her shoulder, throwing her sprawling on the ground, and starting to kick her in the middle. Jaime walked into the throne room, freezing, feeling a moment of doom going down his spine. In his mind's eye, he saw the travesty of the scene of Elia, Aegon and Rhaenys being presented before the throne, wrapped in Lannister banners, their forms disfigured by the cruelty of another monster dressed as a knight. Stop this, Sir Boros, he yelled, making the crowd part for them. Uncle, you have no voice here, Joffrey called from where he stood on the dais of the throne, highly amused and entertained. Sansa was crying on the ground, feeling sore and broken. Jaime wasn't moved by Joffrey's taunt. Step away, Sir Boros, he repeated. He's acting on my command, Joffrey said. He is. Prince Joffrey is feeling unwell. He obviously has no idea what he is doing, Jaime declared coldly. Step away, Sir Boros. The knight smiled evilly, raising his boot and stomping onto Sansa's hand, causing her to yell out in pain. Jaime unsheathed his sword. This is your last warning. Step away. The Kingsguard raised his foot again, though there was trepidation in his eyes now, and Jaime saw the little Aegon's head, or what had remained of it. Jaime charged, pushing the dishonourable knight away from the crying girl, sending them both into a brawl of crossing swords, soon joined when Joffrey sent more redcoats to stop his uncle. Luckily for Sir Boros, because he was last but a moment against Jaime on his own. What is the meaning of this? Ned's powerful voice boomed and echoed around the throne room. His blood roared in his ears when he saw his daughter sprawled on the floor beneath the shadow of the throne. Terrifying memories flooded him. Memories of walking into this very same room, watching what Lannisters had done to their enemies' children. He tore off his cloak, going to Sansa, who held on to him, sobbing. Ella took over, kneeling down as best she could, holding the girl in her arms as Ned stood back up. God, seize that man! The redcoats were at a loss of what to do. They were Lannister men, but Ned was Hand of the King. The Stark men with Ned, though, didn't think twice before advancing against the knights brawling. Noticing they were closing in, Sir Boros tripped Jaime and ran from the room. Joy ordered the pursuit as Sir Barristan and 2 other Kingsguards arrived. More Stark guards arrived with other Starling and Manderley men. Lord Manderley himself came into the room, panting after obviously having run all the way here. Let the ladies go, now, Ned commanded in an icy voice. They are acting on my... Joffrey started, but froze and took a step back once the Northerner turned his furious glare at him. Silver came into the room, snarling lowly in clear threat, and Joffrey stepped away, fear flooding his features at once. The redcoats let go of Marjorie and Alaria immediately, stepping back with their heads low. Sir Barristan, Ned called, Prince Joffrey is tired and in need of returning to his chambers.
He will be too tired, and he need to remain there, without receiving any visitors, until the king calls for him.
Barrister nodded and motioned for the king's guard with him to take the prince, leading the group out of the room.
Lord Manderley, if your guards would be kind enough to escort these redcoats to a room where they can wait to be heard from.
The Lannister guards only lowered their heads and followed, aware that they couldn't refuse.
Court is dismissed! Now!
Ned yelled, making people scramble away. Adam and Daenerys walked in, and he clenched his hands as he took the scene in.
Adam, escort the ladies to the Tower of the Hand, please. Oh, was all he asked. Joffrey! Ned's nostrils flared. Keep them safe as I deal with this.
Ned, what are you going to do? Ella asked, still kneeling next to Sansa. He pulled the badge of office from his chest, uncaring that it ripped the jerkin away.
I will not take this insult. Ella, you start packing. We're leaving as soon as possible. Adam, you have command of the household guard.
Adam looked to Alaria.
What happened?
He asked, seeing her frozen face. I'm fine. Some ice and I'll be good as new, she said, waving off his concern. Sansa cried out as Ella and Marjorie tried to help her up, so the knight knelt down.
Sansa, may I check your ribs?
He asked in a soft voice. She held on to her stepmother and nodded through tear-stained eyes. Adam helped her lie on her back and touched her middle as delicately as he could.
I'm no maester, sweetling, but I think you got at least one broken rib. You shouldn't walk. Is it okay if I carry you?
She nodded, and Adam raised his hand to Ned.
Go do what you have to do. I've got them.
Ned nodded as Jon and Robb came running into the room as well. The oldest immediately ran to his wife. But other than a rumpled sleeve, Marjorie was fine and waved off his concern.
Boys, I want everyone back in the Tower of the Hand and packing. Ella will be busy with Sansa. So Marjorie and Daenerys, if you could ask Isla and Bertha to help coordinate everything. I must speak with the king, Ned said, and with a kiss to Sansa's forehead, he laughed. I must speak with Edric, Alaria said, exchanging a look with her siblings. Please let me know if there is anything you need. Ella smiled and squeezed her sister's hand. Adam stood and walked around Sansa, helping his sister to her feet, what her big pregnant belly would prevent her from doing herself. Then, slowly, Adam took Sansa into his arms as carefully as he could, trying to jostle her as little as possible, and they walked back to the Tower of the Hand with an army of Stark, Starling, Baratheon and Tyrell men. Silver walked ahead and barked at anyone who didn't move out of the way. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Holy moly, Sansa! Oh sweet girl, I'm so sorry that happened to you. It's horrid in the show and in the books, but reading it aloud myself is something else. I just want to give you a cuddle. And at the very end there with Adam calling her sweetling, I like that he's taken on the uncle figure to the others as well. Joffrey's gone batshit nuts. And of course, Littlefinger being, well, he's a bitch, isn't he? Anyway, you guys know the drill. Like, comment and subscribe and hit that bell to get notified for whatever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, girls and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.